The movie begins in Miami Beach as Dan Forrester and several other troops fall from the skies into a devastated area. Dan lands in a pool with other people who keep falling. Return 28 years earlier to December 2022. Dan is a biology teacher who lives with his wife Emmy and daughter Muri. Dan is at a Christmas party hoping to hear back about a job opportunity at a research facility. He receives a phone call informing him that they have chosen someone else for the position. As he returns inside to watch the World Cup with his family, the arena suddenly opens up, revealing many soldiers from the future to the confused audience. Lieutenant Hart, a female soldier, informs everyone that 30 years from now, humanity will be wiped off the face of the world due to a massive alien invasion. The objective is to recruit anyone they can to travel to the future and save humanity from extinction. A year later, rioting and anti-war protests continue as the draft has been an impact since its initial announcement, with more casualties than anything else. Hope for the future continues to fade. Even Dan students can concentrate on their work since they believe that everyone is going to die eventually. Dan is later summoned to report for a draft. After being evaluated, he discovers that he satisfies the standards because he died between the present and the period preceding the invasion. He has a tool on his arm that will help him time leap. It is also revealed that Dan was a squad leader in Iraq 15 years ago. Dan is given 24 hours to settle his affairs and goes to Emmy's job as a therapist for those who have returned from the draft. Emmy informs Dan that the only person who can help bring the family to safety is Dan's estranged father, James, whom he resents for abandoning him and his mother a long time ago. Dan pays a visit to James, who has gone off the grid due to distrust of the government. Before Dan can ask for help, James states he has never sought his assistance, which enrages Dan because that is all he has ever wanted from him, despite James's claim that he would have just made things worse for Dan and his mother. Dan returns home to Emmy and Muri and informs them that he has been drafted. They are heartbroken and hug Dan farewell. Dan reports to the draft and meets Charlie, Dorian, Nora, and Cowan. The draftees are informed about the time-jumping process as well as their mission plan. Charlie informs Dan that they send those who died before the conflict to avoid a contradiction, while also mentioning that Dorian jumped back after killing an extraterrestrial known as White Spikes. With no time to prepare, the draftees are summoned to travel through the jump link into the future, where they will arrive on Miami Beach. Things go wrong because the draftees are dropped down much higher than planned, resulting in some deaths while Dan and others end themselves in the ocean. After exiting, Dan reports to Romeo Command / the Colonel, who informs the team that the military has ordered a blanket bombardment of the area to eliminate all living things. She directs the squad to rescue lab people before the bombs are dropped. The team proceeds into the building where they discover the lab crew has died, but they collect their findings. Soon the gang encounters the White Spikes, who are quick and deadly with whip-like tails. Dan and his crew manage to kill more White Spikes as they flee, but Cowan falls through a tunnel, and Dan tries help him. The White Spikes are closing in, so Nora and Cowan remain behind to repel as many as possible, shortly as the military dumps explosives on the tunnel, killing Nora, Cowan, and the White Spikes. The remaining draftees awaken at a camp in the Dominican Republic. Dan encounters the Colonel, who turns out to be an adult Maori. She has some resentment toward Dan for going ahead with the draft. She informs Dan that her team has identified a female White Spike whose physiology may be critical in destroying the remainder of the hive. The team discovers the cave containing the female, but dozens of male White Spikes begin to fall. Some are destroyed by chopper blades as soldiers continue to fight them off. The team successfully cages the female, but Dan nearly jeopardizes the expedition to save Maury. She reprimands him before revealing to him that he died in a vehicle accident 7 years after the draft, and Maury witnessed his final moments, all of which occurred after he returned from the draft, got disillusioned, and abandoned his family, which is why she is estranged from him. The team transports the female back to an oil rig where the jump link is located in order to manufacture a toxin from the female's blood that will kill all White Spikes. Many more aliens quickly overrun and attack the base, resulting in another fierce struggle. The female white spike escapes from the jump link as time runs out. The female attacks, causing the bridge to fall while Murray is on it. Although Dan tries to save her, she lets go, allowing her and the girl to perish while Dan and the remaining draftees return to their present year. Dan tries furiously to return and save Murray, but it is fruitless because the jump link is now offline, making the jump impossible. He has also managed to keep the toxin as they were unable to tear it from his grasp. Dan returns home. While speaking with Emmy, he reveals that he met Maury as an adult and worked with her. Emmy suggests that the aliens may have arrived much earlier than 2048 when the invasion began. Dan then goes to a club and sees Dorian, who informs him that he has terminal cancer. Dan inquires about a white spike claw that he preserved as a souvenir, and they locate ash on it from Russia. Dan questions one of his students about volcanic ash, which leads to everyone concluding that the white spikes have been on Earth all along and have been thawed out by global warming. Dan, Charlie, and Dorian try to persuade a higher-level government official to allow them to go on a mission to Russia, but he refuses. Dan then asks James for assistance, and they, along with the other soldiers, make it to Russia and locate the location of the frozen white spikes. It turns out that the ship they arrived on belonged to a different species, which was transporting the white spikes as cargo to eliminate other planets. They proceed to inject the toxin into the white spikes, but the aliens awaken and start attacking. After a bloody battle, Dorian sacrifices himself to annihilate the white spikes with a bomb. Unfortunately, the female white spike survives, and she pursues Dan and James. They try to inject her with the poison, but she chews off her arm to keep it from spreading. Dan shoves the toxin into the female's throat and knocks her off a cliff, where she splatters, effectively putting an end to the white spikes. News of the war's prevention spreads, with the previous higher-up assuming credit for Dan and the others' journey. Dan reunites with Emmy and Murray, who he introduces to James.